Wow, we don't have our headphones. This is scary. This is completely
Here we go.
A shot in the dark.
Welcome back to the Smart Nonsense Podcast. This is episode 58. I'm Henry. That is Dylan. On Smart Nonsense, we talk about entrepreneurship, self-development, and challenging norms. Today, for this camera, How I Built This by Guy Raz. For that camera, How I Built This. This is a book by Guy Raz, the founder of How I Built This, the podcast on NPR. Also the book, The Unexpected Paths to Success from the World's Most Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Hot off the press. Came out yesterday. Yesterday.
Yeah, we actually got...
You own like 6 copies of it.
I own a lot of copies of this, mostly accidentally. We ended up stumbling upon the creators. I don't know, what do they call us? Like
like the media, the press.
Yeah, we're like press people.
Yeah, we got press credentials for this book.
Yes. So we didn't need to buy it. We bought it. Then we realized it's super hard to read. So we're like, we got to buy the Audible as well. We've done it all. Guy Raz, what do you know about him? You listen to a lot about How I Built This.
I listened to a lot of How I Built This. My understanding is Guy Raz I actually didn't do my due diligence, but I know kind of the back half of his life was a stint in journalism, and then he spent his time at NPR, but I feel like you might know a bit more about him.
Yeah, right now he has 3 podcasts. I only listen to How I Built This, but in total, he has over 14 million monthly listeners for all his podcasts. There's one for kids too, which is like the only one out there. Oh. He's crazy. He used to be a war zone reporter.
That's right.
And then
that's where he got his start.
This was his first venture into entrepreneurship, which is weird. He just started, I think it was Sarah Blakely, is that her name? From Spanx. Mm-hmm. That was the very first episode. And it was just like totally new for him. But it's cool because now he's talked to, I don't know how many people with How I Built This, but a lot. There are a lot of stories in here.
Here's the thing about How I Built This. When I first found it, my girlfriend recommended it to me. And I was going through the podcast app because I wanted to add episodes. And it was just like hit after hit. I was like, how are they booking these people? And from day one, Sarah Blakely at Spanx. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, probably any company that you're into, it's probably there.
Right.
So he's just distilling everything he's learned about startups from the very beginning, like when you have the idea, when you go. He actually breaks it down into 3 different stages. Man, I got my notes everywhere, but it's the call. So it's like the origination. You have the actual table of contents, but the call, the tests, and the destination. And it goes basically in the chronology of a startup.
And we were saying this is going to be a hard one. So we wanted to review this before it came out because we're such big fans of How I Built This, right? But it's just chock full of anecdotes and gems, things that like we can't possibly dive into on this podcast. There's so many. Every chapter was like 6.
He's taking all these podcasts, probably 1,000 hours at least more of just interviews and stuff. And it's in one book. There are a ton of stories. We'll try and cover a few of them.
I just want to like pick out a few chapters. I think you and I both resonated first with the bit on, is something dangerous or is it scary?
Right.
I think that's a really good place to start because dangerous and scary are 2 completely different things. A lot of things we do are scary. I tell my mom, like a lot of my travels are scary, but they're not dangerous, right? And entrepreneurs are always jumping off cliffs, he says, building airplanes as they go. That's scary. No, that was scary and dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with everyone just associates all this risk, this uncertainty of having the startup. And that's like, is it going to kill you? Dangerous. Like there's the, they talk about the sharks and like sharks, yeah, they're scary, but they kill 1 person a year. So they're not actually dangerous. And you think of the thousands, millions of people in the water.
Meanwhile, like more people are dying in the bathtub.
Right. 3 times more likely or whatever the stat is. So it's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You see it, people are scared of it, but it's not actually dangerous.
Right.
I liked where they talked about, I'm forgetting the Boston Consulting Group. Was it Jim Cook or Cook?
Yeah, Koch.
Yeah, but it sounds like Cook when they say
so many. The reason I didn't like this book was because of all the names. That's my kryptonite.
Well, one, if you're an entrepreneur, we didn't cover this, but you have to listen to this book or read it. But it's chock full of stories, and it's like almost too many to really sink in. It's like
it's a good way. Let me tell you, it's a good way to start the week. I think I texted you. I was like, "This is inspirational stuff."
So Jim Cook, spelled like Coke, he he started, what was the beer company?
Sam Adams.
Sam Adams. And for him, he was working as a top-level consultant, Boston Consulting Group, and he basically had it all, making like $500,000 a year decades ago. And he's like, it's scary getting into entrepreneurship, but it's not dangerous. Like the scary part is starting the company, but the danger is you realize you don't have a fulfilling life after at 65 or whatever when you retire. Like that's the real danger.
That's danger. It's cool too because he left, was it Boston Consulting Group?
Pretty sure.
He leaves to found a brewery and everyone's telling him not to do it, including his family of brewmasters.
Right.
They're telling him not to do it. And here we are. He's, founded Sam Adams.
So that's really one of those foundational areas where it's like recognize the true danger is just not following what you should do. You're not going to die. You're just going to fail, and maybe you do it publicly, but that's the worst that can happen unless you take on absurd credit card debt, which we might get into. But we're lucky enough not to be at that stage. Basically it's this one mentality getting that right, and then you have the idea stage, and it's like he talks a little bit. Guy Raz gets into: are you searching for an idea? Do you stumble upon it? What's the actual process? And I think he says it's a mix of both. Like some people go out and search. A lot of business school students, like where is there a need in the market? Some people just, like us, they solve their own problems and realize like, oh, maybe this extends. Other people have this problem. Right. So it is interesting to think, but there are a couple of key factors that makes or breaks an idea. And we've gotten into it before. Like execution is big, but having the right idea is going to be the positive or negative. So with idea, usually you want to have like your passion. Like you got to first be passionate about it. And so that's like the first stage, and that's just like a hobbyist. If you're just into whatever you're doing, that's you're just tinkering. Like kind of this podcast to some extent is just like a hobby. Mm-hmm. And then the second stage is like the tinkerer, where you can be, into it and you're solving your own problem. So like creating a little system for the podcast for scaling it and like, distributing content. That's kind of what we're doing. But once you get to the level of shared problem, like other people have these problems and you're solving those problems, that's when you're actually an entrepreneur.
Right.
So it's recognizing where you are there, but it's got to do that mix of you're passionate about it and it's solving people's problems. That's pretty much it. That's the formula.
That's it. And like you said, they teach that in business school, and they've taught that in classes and different like entrepreneurial hubs I've been a part of. But you can't force that. You can't I think a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they go out trying to impose a problem on someone. Or, the trope is you've created a solution in search of a problem. And I think Guy Raz knows better than anyone else that, he's talked to so many people. I feel like, at least in my mind, it seems like 80% of these things come out of your own passion and your own tinkering, for your own problem. Those are that's the trifecta, right?
Right. Well, you're going to be able to solve for yourself. That's super easy to do. But I think even if you don't have your own problem, he talks about the importance of research and just knowing this is a problem I am solving for a need, whether it's your own, that's enough research to some extent, but going out and that's where this whole, you're all in because it will work. A lot of, that's the underlying trend is they're just 100% confident that this is going to work. There is a lot of survivorship bias, which we have to recognize.
Yeah.
Like for every one company we talk about here, there are 9 at least that have failed.
Yeah.
But that's key is just really knowing that it's going to work in spite of what everyone else says. That's you with Dunbar.
We talked about that yesterday. Maybe 9 of those fail because they don't even pass the market research litmus test.
Right.
So who knows how true those statistics are.
Right. That was, everyone's going to hear it yesterday, but that was Nick Kokonis and Tim Ferriss.
That's right.
And it's just do your due diligence as in research.
That's meta.
No, you have a problem.
Everyone's going to hear this yesterday.
Isn't it
something like that.
But it'll be 2 weeks for us. I think actually, was it Paul Graham that said the number one problem?
I do remember the names. Well, it is Paul Graham.
He's a pretty big dude.
Right.
Paul Graham was basically hey, that's one of the number one reasons they fail is because they're just not actually solving a problem. So do your research, make sure you have a problem. What was interesting is like when you're figuring out what kind of market you want to go into, there are a couple of case studies. That's why I wrote them down to make sure I remember them. But
you should publish your notes. I see all these flowcharts.
Got flowcharts on flowcharts. One thing that's interesting is like people are attracted to like say Bitcoin or whatever. They want to get into it and like, I don't know, I'll be a miner. Like get into the hardest part where the most competition is. But what's probably a better strategy? Wow, I am so hot with these lights.
I know.
I am sweating
It's not
bullets.
the lights. It's not the lights. It's the room.
It's
These lights don't make any heat. They're LEDs.
Oh man, you got to watch the video. We're sweating bullets out here. But here's what's going on, right? You have the hyper competition, but if you're a startup, it's hard to win, especially in a winner takes all market. So figure out where the gold rush is and where all the miners are going, and then sell pants and shovels to the miners. That was Levi Strauss with Levi's jeans. He was basically selling to all these miners.
There were a few,
pants.
right? Ghirardelli, Strauss, basically anyone in San Francisco during the gold rush. It's like everyone's panning for gold. Let's go the other way and sell them something else that they need.
And a more modern day version of that was Belkin, which basically in the 80s, they had all these computers and printers and different machines coming out, but they couldn't connect them easily. And he's this like 22-year-old kid. It's like, how do I get into this market? I can't compete with these large IBM type companies. I'll just connect the printer to the computer. And now it's massive and you'll find it in every Apple store or whatever store you go to.
Right. I was confused because I've had a lot of Belkin phone cases.
Well, they do everything.
They've clearly,
you know, they're not just doing cables for the last 40 years. So that's really the essence is like figure out where the niche is. You don't want to go where the hyper competition is because you want that Peter Thiel monopoly stuff. And then once you have the niche, hopefully it's going to grow with whatever that burgeoning industry is.
Yeah, good word.
My mom complimented me the other day. She's like, wow, you're using good words.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, good vocab.
So once you have the idea, we kind of get into like, how do you get it off the ground? And the first way to get money is just bootstrapping. It's like the opposite. You don't make money, you just cut costs.
Right.
And that means, you know, eating ramen, not having the best production quality, but if the product itself is good enough, people, especially the early adopters, will overlook any of the little nitpicky stuff.
And it's like voluntary simplicity, like we talk about. You know, if you need to funnel funds into something you're starting, well, you better be okay, like eating ramen, sleeping on a friend's floor, doing whatever. All of these origin stories are just like bootstrap after bootstrap after bootstrap. And I think too many people are uncomfortable with that lifestyle because it is hard.
Yeah, especially now, like you come from a good school. That was actually a trend. A lot of these people came from good schools. But it's like, I want to keep my status the same. Like I feel like I'm dropping down a couple bars if I'm going and living on a friend's couch and I graduated from Harvard.
Got to go down to go up. You've got.
I gotta make that post. God damn, that blog post.
Do you blog anymore?
Nope, I don't. Just a podcaster. So that's what we do. That's what I think the underlying trend is. And at the same time, it's like, don't go all in. Like, kind of ease your way in to, or especially if like you have these costs at home that you can't get around, like food. Like that costs money. So Damon John, for example, a lot of interesting things there, but he had FUBU, which was basically just like the gangster, the rapper type clothing that just wasn't in the market. He was still working as like a waiter at, what was it, Red Lobster?
Yeah.
For a while after he had
success,
but he just couldn't make the full transition. And I think people often hear like, oh, I want to go and get funding. And they're just like, oh, I'm going to go straight to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, get funding, and then kind of prove my idea from there. That's not how the majority of these people start. Right.
I think actually the overwhelming sentiment in this book is don't quit your 9 to 5. Yeah, he did that. He did that. Even, well, okay, FUBU's kind of an anomaly because he was on the brink of bankruptcy like 18 different times. It was always like on again, off again. He would not have been able to stay afloat without Red Lobster.
Right.
It's cool. Like I know Jimmy Yang. He's the actor for Jin Yang on Silicon Valley. He was driving Uber through the first like season or two. And he's on this hit HBO show. He's driving Uber just to like make ends meet. It's great. He was also practicing his stand-up.
That's the thing. It's like people think they see like, oh, they sell this company for hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, but they just started off struggling and it takes years that you don't see. That's why you're creating the vlog. and it's like, hey, there's a
If
hustle.
I start driving Uber Eats, like you're gonna see me do that.
Right. And you might. I mean, you're flipping cameras.
I would not rule it out. I would not rule it out.
So bootstrapping, I think a big part of like while you're bootstrapping, what doesn't cost money and can really accelerate growth is key. One of those is just telling your story well. And I mean, we'll see it everywhere, but that's the underlying trend is like everyone has their reason. Like you have your 3,000 Facebook friends that you just got sick of. You're not meeting these people. For me, it's the podcast.
I realize I'm exaggerating. I don't have that many Facebook friends.
Yeah.
But
no
it's
one
a lot.
expected it. Whatever.
What was that storytelling bit Guy Raz was talking about where he went in to this kind of dilapidated company and they weren't telling a good story. They didn't believe in it. I think it was a water something. And he went in and he totally flipped it on him for like a talk. But it was brilliant the way he crafted.
I know. I'm forgetting the company too, but it's... Oh, shoot. Well, I'll use another analogy.
Hey, really quick, do you use Kindle? Because
Yeah.
like I highlighted things in the Kindle. This is my first time reading a book in the Kindle. And can I see like a log of all my highlights or do you have to go through?
You should have asked me. I was just looking at my highlights.
Do you have to go all the way through? Because I know I highlighted
just-
this. That's why.
You scroll through. There's a section. We'll
Okay.
talk about it later.
Let's have a podcast on highlighting in the Kindle.
True. Yeah, goddamn. But there's something like, say, for example, 1-800-JUNK. That was an example of this
Yeah.
company. Like, you have people come on and they had a bad culture because they didn't buy into the vision. They're just like, oh, we help people get rid of trash.
Right.
But the vision is actually like, hey, we're going to improve your life by eliminating all these unnecessary just distractions, this junk in your life. And that's how it's going to make it better. So that was...
You'll feel fulfilled
Right.
by getting rid of your junk. Like that was the story.
I love addition by subtraction.
Right.
That's basically the mission, and that helps internally and when you're selling this to people.
And so what's the founder do? Fires everyone.
Just
11 people.
eliminates, starts from scratch. That's why it's so important to really get the foundation right, because if you don't from the start, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I try and spend extra time in the beginning with our own team. I think that's so foundational to the direction you go.
Oh, that was a good one. Talk about independence when hiring really good people. It was at Patagonia. Their employees were so good at what they do. They're so independent. They love the culture in Patagonia so much that they're practically unemployable anywhere else. I thought that was super cool.
Explain that more, because like unemployable as in...
Oh, I forget what he said. I bookmarked it because I think it was at the end of the book. Unemployable in the sense that like they wouldn't fit in at any traditional company.
Right.
Because they're not just going to sit around and follow orders. They had this awesome rule. It was like, if there's a surf at 5 p.m. or something, like take it.
Right.
Go take it. Burton, too, would close if they got 2 feet of snow.
Right.
Those are cool culture things. Like, that's what keeps people around. Patagonia, too, like they had great childcare. They'd send nannies on their work trips and vacations. And those kids ended up coming back and working for Patagonia. That's a good investment.
Yeah, it's kind of this mix. That's kind of later on in the book when it talks about the destination, like really having the culture. But that's so key, is just being casual, like being cool. Like this is what you'd want to do with your friends.
There was one instance in the book, it kind of kept coming up, that was the antithesis of that and how poorly things go when you don't abide by those notions of culture. And it was the founder of American Apparel, who was basically just doing everything, micromanaging. He was literally like head designer, photographer, also model. He was like literally the company.
Right.
And when things went down, they went down really fast because of that. So that's the inverse, at least.
Yeah. So I think it's just key to really, from the start, have that good team, have the good, just moral, like the culture within, because at the start, especially, you can't pay people as much as you want to. So you have to have these other perks, and since it's just fun to work there. Another important one is the co-founder that you start with. And I think I want to say Paul Graham as well.
Say it.
I want to say Paul Graham.
Say it.
But like the number one reason why startups fail. Okay, it might be, he has a couple ones, but this is, number one is just like, they're trying to do it all themselves. They don't have another founder with them. Because I guess Guy Raz talks about this, but the downs, the lows of a startup are so low that if you don't have this network around you, which, and the co-founder, that's the best there is, you're going to flounder. You're going to fail. And that's kind of why it's nice that we have this little mix of like we have an off day.
It's bad.
You just bring each other up as long as you're optimists.
Right. Right.
Can't have double negative.
I think too, like that's an overarching trend in just how I built this podcast. So many things go wrong for these people. So many things. And if you can't roll with those punches, they're like weekly, monthly. Like, I mean, it's something like on the podcast, a product will be launched and literally everything's wrong with it. Like if you can't handle those lows and you don't have people with you that can handle them, it's like you're never going to get out. You're never going to get to the highs, which are so incredibly high.
Right.
Doubly props to the married folks that he talks about. I don't know. That's something like I would love to do. I would love to go to business with a partner like that, but I think it would be too much.
That's even why, like, thinking about us even living together, it's like that might be too much time.
It's too much.
That's you got to come in and then leave.
Exactly. I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, obviously COVID's an issue, but I'm like, why are we, like, we're not really hanging out outside the office. And I think if we did, it'd be trouble.
Right.
It'd be trouble.
That's why we still haven't watched this Netflix documentary.
Dilemma. Right.
Okay, so a couple other points, I guess.
It's hot in here.
I love it. The heat is cranked up. Iterating. It talks about just iterating, because you're not going to have the perfect product. We've talked about this before, but just get out there, do a lot, and you'll find the direction once you get feedback.
And then this gets into, we'll talk about luck later on, but it's all about just like creating inertia. Version 1 of your product's not going to be it. Version 2 is not going to be it. Version 10 probably isn't going to be it. But if you're not just like moving and causing momentum and like stirring the pot, how are you ever going to get to a point where, well, you're on How I Built This, talking to Guy Raz. You have to iterate. And you have to be agile and quick to iterate.
Right. You don't want to be the person that's just stuck like, oh, this is the greatest idea in the world. Why isn't the market accepting it? Well, I mean, if you're testing enough different niches.
I saw an awesome quote. It was something like, you need to be married to your business and just dating the idea or something.
Yeah, where did we hear that? Because I heard that.
Right. Too. Basically, like, you need to be married to the fact that you're in this thing, you're in this entity, but you're just dating around kind of the iterations, the different ideas, the more micro. That's not how the quote goes, but that's the point.
Yeah, so once you do finally get this a little bit of traction, what you want to do is just double down on your customers, because they're the people that if you treat them well, they're going to spread the message. They're going to love coming back themselves. That's your most powerful growth mechanism, especially if you're short on cash. It's just like, this is all free, word of mouth. That's why like having guests on is good for podcasts. We don't do enough of it. We will. But everyone just gets involved in your little ecosystem and they want to come in and live in it. And that's what happened with Five Guys.
Built the village.
You remember Five Guys? I think they talk about it.
Oh, basically, that's right. Yeah.
They had parents. One, they tried a lot of businesses, which is kind of funny. But then they do one in this obscure side street. And
right.
They're like, well, if our product is really good, which is cheeseburgers, hamburgers, so they'll start coming in droves if the product is good. And that's what happened was everyone just started coming in, and then very quickly people that were there started telling their friends, and their friends were like, oh, this is amazing, this is a hidden gem. And they started investing. They're like, hey, can we please invest? And like, well, I guess. And they started to open up different locations. And so it really should be that the idea is so good that people just get on board, want to spread your message, especially when you take care of them well. Customer service, we talk about a lot. That's such an easy way. That's why Super 73 is in hot water right now.
Super 73 is in Super 73 hot water right now. Yeah, they need to send you some new parts. I don't like it either. I made like 6 videos for them.
Not good. But yeah, you treat them well. I know basically there's this idea that you're never going to, or it's very rare that you'll take a bad company and make it good. All you do is take a good company and make it great.
Yes.
That's so take Airbnb, for example. Like it had a little bit of traction. Actually, their story is so amazing. It's like,
it's crazy.
It's incredible. Like that episode, we should link it. It's just.
Oh, they were on How I Built This?
Yeah. Joey Gebbia.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Actually went to RISD. He donated a ton to our club hockey team because he was super into hockey.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know.
But whatever. It's just a story of scrappers, but it didn't get a ton of traction until they went in and started taking the photos themselves to really make sure that it looked like a hotel room versus just this dude's like trap house. And so that was just the little tweak that they had to make in addition to others that made it great versus just good.
You should link that like 11-star service too. Maybe it's 6 stars. I can't remember how many stars.
I think it was like 13.
Okay. What's the 13-star experience or something?
Yeah.
That's a great article. I think I sent it to you, but we should find it.
Right. You take the ideal, the perfect world, like if it was incredible, something you'd spend $20,000 on, and then figure out how to make that possible on like a normal scale.
Right.
Like you spend $50
right.
for a room.
And you do that exercise by going through the different stars of service from like a 1-star, worst idea ever, what's a horrible thing, all the way up to 11 or 13.
That's really cool. I want to do more of that.
Do more of that.
So yeah, the same thing with Twitch too. This is a good little anecdote we should talk about quickly. Where originally, I think it was called Justin TV.
Yeah.
And they had it and it was just like, okay, this like 24/7, like you're live streaming for a lot and it's just for creators in general. And it had all these different categories, but at some point they kind of maxed out, like they weren't growing much. But they noticed this one category was. And that one category had as much business as all the other categories combined. And it was gaming. Like, shit, gaming is crushing it. Let's just branch off from Justin TV, make Twitch, and they kind of ran them both simultaneously. But Twitch was growing so fast that, like, you know, we got to shut down Justin TV. It's like a decent idea, but it's not becoming great, whereas Twitch is. And that's when they just invested all their time there. So I think that's something we keep coming back to is like, the idea should have traction and you should like be fighting to keep people away from it.
Even if it's not what you thought it was, right? Like in this case, I feel like a lot of people create products that start getting used for a reason you never would have thought people used it. And good things come out of that too. And then you got a 10x on what's working.
I'm so curious to see with Dunbar.
Right.
Because you have a lot of moving parts.
Right.
It's like, where is the bulk of the value?
What's going to stick?
I'm so curious.
So let's say we put this thing out and it's got these kind of 5 features we talk about. Maybe everyone goes all in on QR codes. Maybe it's all in, people just want discounts. Maybe like people are really into the DMing. That's like, I'm just as curious.
I'm picturing like it could be this, like I said to you, maybe it's like, it's not even like your Dunbar 150. It's just like your neighbors that are close by.
Right.
There's so many
I actually found another app. Maybe you'd like it. It's just about hanging out with people in person. It's called 20. Give them the plug.
There you go. So we'll be testing it. That's why I love just like iterating really quickly, getting feedback. You go from there. I think there's like once you do start getting that traction, that's when VC money comes in. Mm-hmm. They talk about it right before that. You want to do like friends and family money too, because they're not going to suck the equity out of the company.
Right.
There's this founder's dilemma of like, do you want control or do you want to be rich? Or it's like basically the king or the rich person. I don't know what it is. But you do have to give away some of your company once VCs come in, especially. But usually people start there.
But it's 2020, you know, and we've got more technology than ever. You can launch a product on Kickstarter and own the whole thing and, you know, just take $20 from this person, $10 from this person. Allbirds did that. And they also, so funny story about Allbirds is, as Guy Raz says, like they launched their Kickstarter. They're trying to fulfill orders and their manufacturer like did the tooling or something only in size 10. Like all their shoes, all the money they made was men's shoes size 10. I think this is just in the podcast. But then it's like, what do? You launch your product and you can't even, you just have to be honest. And they sent them, they're like, sorry, you're getting a men's 10. That's all.
Same thing with the Ring episode, right? They found it, somehow hacked the system, but just like crafty ways of just kind of making it meet when you think it'd be the end of the world.
Right. Again, those are the low lows. And that's when a co-founder becomes so important. Co-founder and kind of a gritty founder, just in general.
But none of these people give up. It's like everyone goes through the lows, but they just keep pushing on. There's the Robert Frost quote, which I hope I get it right, but it's like, fuck, what is it? I wrote it down. It's like when you can't get out, go through. Basically, something like that. Like you're stuck. What is it? I wrote it down somewhere. I'm not
Explain it, and I'll find it.
Basically, the idea is like, okay, you think you're trapped.
I'm gonna use the index here.
God,
I got you.
You think you're trapped, and you can't find a way out. So the way out is just drive through.
Yeah.
And go through the wall and just double down. Like you got to do it. That's what everyone does. I wish I could find it. I got so many notes.
This is
everywhere.
like the one thing I learned in school is how to use a glossary and how to use an index.
It's failing us.
137 and 38. We're close. I'm on 134.
Here, I'll talk for a second about pivoting.
Oh, I see something related. Yeah, talk about pivoting.
Well, pivoting is cool. There's one with basically this. There was
Wait.
This,
you
okay,
stop right there.
Go, you minx.
You stop right there. Okay. I lost it.
There he is. Should I talk again? Or you're gonna interrupt
Yeah,
me.
talk again, but
All
I'm
right.
gonna interrupt you.
Yes. Okay. So there's this one guy that had a video game.
I found
company.
it. Yes.
Go.
Okay. The best way out is always through. That's exactly what you said.
Yes.
Go
there
on.
we go.
Go
It was
on.
worth the wait. So pivoting, there was this one company. I'm forgetting the founder's name, but they were trying to do this video game company, and it just wasn't catching on.
Mm-hmm.
Like they tried and pushed and had this big company around it, but it just didn't work out. So they're like, okay, we kind of got to shut it down. And they went to change, and they realized like, hey, this little internal messaging that we had to create the video game was kind of
Exactly
dope.
right.
And then they just took that exact technology and started selling it to other people under the name Slack. So it's just like you take what works, you're like, oh,
For
other
yourself,
people could use
what
it.
works for yourself, you know? Like that was working internally at their company and had nothing to do with their product. They were just chit-chatting on their direct messages. And now the whole world's on Slack.
Wow, there's so many good little stories. There is the downside, though, of you'll build a great company, and there are a lot of examples. Dippin' Dots is the first that comes to mind. And then you'll just get caught up in these lawsuits and just like trying to protect your idea. And you don't have, or you have a moat in theory, but it's just so hard to defend. Dippin' Dots, the story, really quick, is just basically they had their idea. It's, for those of you that don't know, it's just like they'd flash freeze these little dots of ice cream. Super good.
Liquid nitrogen.
Liquid nitrogen, right. And then another company came and they're like, we're going to call it Dots of Fun, and basically infringed on their patent. And they had to go through this expensive lawsuit to finally win. And Dots of Fun, they're like, oh, we're just going to pivot. If we just add a little bit of ice cream in, keep all the dots, but just have like 10% of just soft serve, then we can still sell it. And they called it Mini Melts. And so it just, this crazy lawsuit ends up costing $10 million. They end up losing it. It's just like, you don't want to get in that case. I had it in my last company. Lawsuits just sucked the life
Why
out of
wasn't
you.
Dippin' Dots patented?
It
It's a
was,
food product.
it just wasn't like properly patented or just easy to go around it. And so they just didn't win. But what they didn't realize is the value was in the brand.
Right.
Like people recognize Dippin' Dots'
I don't know
name.
I don't know what Mini Melts is.
Right. No one does. But they were concerned. They did this expensive lawsuit, which opportunity cost takes time, distracts you. Again, I saw that. Like our founder was distracted by this expensive lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not worth
And then
it
you
if you
get
can avoid it.
desperate, right? Like the founder of Dippin' Dots got desperate. They bring in new money. That new money, as in people, start taking over the company, and it's just
Right.
over.
Right. Was it that some
Out
other
of Illinois
company?
too.
Huh?
They're out of Illinois, Dippin' Dots.
Look at all these companies.
Yeah.
So I think just avoid lawsuits. Like the real moat around your business is going to be the brand. If you can do that, do some technology that's hard to copy in code or whatever it is. Find your moat and just build it strong so that you don't have to get
That's
into
what
lawsuits.
it's all about. We could not possibly end this podcast on Guy Raz without talking about luck.
Yes.
It's also probably the only chapter we can really remember because it wasn't all stories and anecdotes. But it's fascinating because you listen to how I built this. Every single episode ends in Guy Raz asking the founder, how much of your story do you attribute to luck and how much to true hard work and grit and determination? And now, finally, we have Guy Raz's opinion on the matter. And I just ripped my page. So what I liked most that Guy Raz said is the whole world runs on luck. The question, oh, he didn't even say this. Oh, well, it's in here. The whole world runs on luck. The question is what you do with it. And then Guy Raz goes on to add, the thing about luck too is that you actually have some agency over it. And this gets back to the inertia point. And we should have brought up Naval Ravikant's 4 types of luck. But basically, one type of luck is just creating inertia and momentum and running as hard as you can and throwing as many pieces of spaghetti at the wall. Because then you will have so many opportunities in front of you that it will look like luck, but it's actually kind of like serendipity.
going back to who knows what episode
Sarah
that
Dietschy.
is, Sarah Dietschy episode with David Perel. Yeah, it's just like there are all these opportunities. That's what luck is. It's just like who is seizing them. And right now, I think it's a massive opportunity. We talked about this yesterday in the Nick Kokonis episode. But it's like, all right, well, if you look at COVID right now, it's an insane opportunity for new startups and business owners because you can come in and buy anything for much less than you could in the past. Get started, the competition is less. If you can be agile and adapt, you have a significant advantage.
Yeah.
So right now, like that's why we're jumping into this stuff. It's like perfect timing.
It's perfect timing. I think, too, a lot of people, I forget the word for it, maybe it's defeatism. They rule themselves out of even trying because of circumstance and then they rag on people who have the fortune or the luck to do these things. And Guy Raz acknowledges that nicely. He says, you and I, we are both lucky, referring to the reader. We're both lucky. I had the opportunity to write this book. You had the money to buy it or the patience to wait for it at the library and the time and the inclination to read it. I don't spend much time in my day thinking about how lucky I am to like be able to buy a $17 book like this and read it.
Or 3 copies of it.
Or in your case, 3 copies of it. That's a $50 lifetime value for how I built this. But that's pretty cool because, again, with every single book we read, we have taken Guy Raz's like entire brain and the 50 brains of the most successful entrepreneurs he's talked to and distilled it down into 272 pages. And we're lucky enough to read that. That's a big deal.
Oh, I want to end there, but at the same time, I want to say really quick. So I'm conflicted here because there are all these cool stories, but it's like an 11-hour audiobook, 200 and something pages. And on the other side of the spectrum, we have the rework or the anything you want. That's just like super concise and just like, here's the 100 pages you need to know. So I don't know if my attention span is lower, but I feel like I just need shorter books.
You're saying this was too much.
Yeah. So I'm curious your opinion, just as we're recapping the book as a whole.
Well, I'm thrown off because I can't gauge that because I don't usually read books on Kindle, and I felt like it went on and on and on forever because I was just flipping a bunch of million micro pages. So I can't comment on that. But I don't know, 11 hours on Audible would take me 3.5 hours for Guy Raz's entire brain.
That's true.
I can't complain.
Yeah. Different approaches. I think they're all good. This is just a cool book to hear a lot of the anecdotes. You don't have to listen to all of How I Built This podcast episodes. You get the nuggets that are most important.
You get the nuggets and a really kind of nice narrative. It's almost like the entire book is what an entrepreneur is, and he breaks it down into the 3 sections, like you said, and takes you through different bits of a whole bunch of different successful entrepreneur stories. And you just pick out the ones that look most like you, confirmation bias, and then you roll on to the next.
We're going to be in the 2nd edition of this book. I know it. Dunbar. I don't think they'll let the podcast in, but who knows? We might be big enough. That was How I Built This.
I know how you can get in really quick. You build, like Nathan for you build dumb How I Built This. Nonsense how I built this. And you just do exactly what he does, and then you do it better, and then you'll take over.
By making a book, are you saying?
No, a podcast. That's how your podcast gets on How I Built This. It's late.
One concern is it's late. It's really hot. There wasn't too much nonsense here. We're kind of worried, but we have a decent setup now. As long as we figure out the heat situation, it's going to be a gem. We'll be back tomorrow. Who knows? We might talk with a friend. We might not. It's still up in the air. You know, we take it day by day. We just iterate like maniacs. But we'll see you. Thanks for listening. By the way, subscribe if you haven't. God, I got to say this in the beginning and the intros. We still don't. Review it. That's what matters. Just review this, mofo.
You know, like in terms of retention, at least for what I know on YouTube, it's like 30% by the end of the video is good. So
it's probably my dad and my mom and maybe your sister.
Probably not.
Your sister.
All right.
See you tomorrow.